We pose the universal information gap. How did our grandparents feed their livestock for absolutely free when the global supply lines were completely severed? And why are those exact same survival crops now illegal, heavily sprayed, or classified as noxious weeds? We introduce the shadow mystery. When World War II ended, the massive munitions factories that produced nitrogen bombs needed a new market, and they launched a coordinated, decades-long psychological operation to trick farmers into abandoning nature's most powerful free proteins in favor of the newly invented feed pellet. Number 1. The severed supply crisis of 1941 shattered any illusions of food security. As German U-boats prowled the Atlantic, Britain's livestock feed imports collapsed by nearly 2/3 within a single year. War Agriculture Committee records show a staggering 65% drop between 1940 and 1941. Farmers faced a stark directive from the ministry: find your own feed, or the country starves. Ration books rolled out across the UK, regulating everything from sugar to meat, while in the United States, sugar rationing began in April 1942, and victory gardens sprang up in backyards and vacant lots. With global shipping lanes cut and grain reserved for human survival, the hunt for alternative feeds became a matter of national urgency. This new reality set the stage for 9 unconventional superfeeds, each one a lifeline in a world where the old rules no longer applied. Number 2. Bocking 14 Comfrey transformed British farms when feed imports vanished. Developed by Lawrence Hills during the war, this sterile hybrid delivered a breakthrough: up to 8 harvests a year, even in drought, thanks to roots plunging 6 feet deep. Farmers cut lush green leaves, yielding a protein content between 24 and 28%, outpacing alfalfa and rivaling modern soy. Wartime diaries and 1943 bulletins called it the savior of the dairy cow, with B12 levels so high they surpassed beef liver by a factor of 10. Comfrey's rapid regrowth meant a single patch could fuel livestock through the entire season, setting a new standard for plant-based feed. As a nutritional lifeline, it proved that high-density protein did not have to come from imported grain or expensive pellets, just a spade, a scythe, and a little patience. Number 3. Comfrey's reputation as a wartime miracle feed collapsed almost overnight after toxicity studies in the 1970s. For decades, British farmers had relied on Bocking 14 Comfrey to keep herds productive through drought and rationing, but a new wave of rodent trials changed the narrative. In those experiments, rats-fed diets containing more than 20% Comfrey leaf developed liver lesions, a finding that triggered public alarm over pyrrolizidine alkaloids. Extension bulletins and feed journals that once praised Comfrey as a protein powerhouse now sounded warnings, even though traditional farm use rarely exceeded 10% of the ration. As Comfrey fell out of favor, alfalfa pellet sales surged. Industry data shows a 180% jump in revenue between 1965 and 1975. Veterinarians began recommending enzyme monitoring, tracking ALT and AST levels in livestock fed any Comfrey. The dramatic reversal, driven by high-dose lab results, reshaped the feed market and set a new precedent for risk aversion. By 1942, the Soil Conservation Service had planted over 100 million seedlings across the Southeast, offering farmers up to $8 per acre. That was serious money during the Depression and war years. Kudzu's peak growth rate reached a foot per day, blanketing eroded hillsides and abandoned fields in a matter of weeks. Extension pamphlets from the era called it a miracle vine, with leaf protein ranging from 22 to 29%, enough to rival commercial feeds, but growing on poor soils with almost no fertilizer. Civilian Conservation Corps crews logged the planting of entire highways, and wartime records show cattle gaining weight on direct grazing when grain was out of reach. The sheer biomass made it a lifeline, setting the stage for a dramatic shift in how American farmers thought about survival and self-reliance. Number 5. The story of Kudzu flips from miracle to menace in the space of a generation. Wartime bulletins and Soil Conservation Service records from the 1940s praised Kudzu as the South's answer to barren fields. Farmers were paid up to $8 per acre to plant it, and by the early 1950s, roadside photos showed entire highways blanketed in lush green. But as the vine spread at a staggering rate of 120,000 acres a year, the media's tone shifted sharply. Headlines in the 1950s and the 1960s coined the phrase, "the vine that ate the South," fueling a sense of crisis. State legislatures responded with a wave of eradication budgets, and by 1975, annual control spending reached $6 million. The same plant once hailed as a savior was now targeted as a noxious weed, not for toxicity, but for its unstoppable growth, illustrating how policy and public perception can be steered by changing economic interests. Number 6. Mangelwurzel became the backbone of British winter feed when imported grain vanished. War Agriculture Committee bulletins from 1941 urged farmers to pull these giant beets and toss them straight to livestock, bypassing the need for scarce concentrates. In 1943, yield trials recorded up to 50 tons per acre, enough to build root heaps that would last through the harshest months. Each root, often weighing 20 pounds, packed dense energy and stored well in the open, making it a practical solution when storage space was limited. Manual harvest demanded serious effort, averaging 9 hours of labor per ton, but the ministry's orders were blunt. Energy mattered more than convenience. While mechanized corn promised speed, Mangelwurzel's sheer mass of calories kept herds alive when every other feed was rationed or gone. The wartime shift to roots set a new standard for emergency resilience, one that faded only as machines took over the fields. Number 7. The fate of Mangelwurzel reveals how mechanization rewrote the rules of farm economics. In the years after World War II, the humble root, once the backbone of British winter feed, faced a new competitor, the corn combine. Farm show brochures from 1949 touted the latest machines, promising to harvest a ton of corn in just 2 hours, compared to the 9 hours of manual labor needed for every ton of Mangelwurzel. These demonstrations, staged at agricultural expos across Northern Ireland and England, made the choice clear. Speed and efficiency were now king. As combine sales soared, the labor-intensive root faded from the fields, edged out not by yield or nutrition, but by the relentless march of technology. The shift marked more than a change in crops. It signaled a turning point where machinery, not muscle, began to dictate what farmers grew, setting the stage for the next chapter in feed innovation. Number 8. Azolla rewrote the rules for protein production in wartime Asia. This tiny aquatic fern, floating on the surface of rice paddies, could double its biomass in just 3 days under the right conditions. With a protein content between 26 and 30%, Azolla became the backbone of duck and pig diets from Vietnam to Japan during the war. Farmers recorded feed conversion ratios as low as 2.5 to 1, outpacing even soy in efficiency. Azolla thrives in water with a pH between 4 and 7, fixing its own nitrogen and requiring no synthetic fertilizer. Wartime extension notes describe how a small pond could supply daily green feed, with Vietnamese logs detailing rapid gains in duck weight and resilience during shortages. By shifting from land to water, Azolla opened a new ecological niche, delivering fast, free protein when every other feed was rationed or gone. Number 9. The post-war surge in synthetic nitrogen fertilizer swept aside centuries-old biological systems like Azolla ponds. In the years after 1945, U.S. munitions plants, once churning out ammonia for explosives, were rapidly converted to fertilizer production. DuPont's annual reports from 1946 detail this transition, with ammonia output at the Bell plant shifting from bombs to breadbaskets almost overnight. By 1960, synthetic nitrogen use in American agriculture had soared by over 1,000%, with per-acre application rates in the Corn Belt increasing nearly 15-fold. As chemical prices dropped, extension bulletins and trade journals promoted ammonium nitrate as the new foundation of modern farming. In this climate, Azolla's role as a living nitrogen source shrank dramatically. Farmers abandoned pond-based systems because cheap synthetic nitrogen made biological fixation seem obsolete. The economic incentives were clear. Industrial fertilizer promised speed and scale, while Azolla, once vital in Asia's rice paddies, became an afterthought in the march toward chemically driven agriculture. Number 10. Hemp seed cake surged into the spotlight during America's wartime push for self-reliance. In 1942, the USDA released its now famous Hemp for Victory film, urging farmers to plant hemp across the Midwest and Great Plains. By 1943, War Production Board records show over 450,000 acres under cultivation, an acreage boom driven by the need for rope, uniforms, and less visibly, livestock feed. The real powerhouse was the seed cake left after oil pressing. With a protein content between 30 and 33%, hemp cake outperformed many commercial feeds on both nutrition and cost. Extension bulletins from the era praised its balanced amino acids and omega-rich profile, ideal for dairy cows and poultry when soy and fish meal were rationed. This pivot to oilseed byproducts marked a turning point in feed strategy, as the nation looked to every available resource to keep herds productive under the strain of global shortages. Number 11. The abrupt return of hemp prohibition after World War II marked one of the sharpest reversals in agricultural policy. In 1945, United States Treasury memos signaled renewed enforcement of the Marijuana Tax Act just 3 years after the government's own Hemp for Victory campaign had driven record plantings across the Midwest. By 1950, official records show hemp acreage collapsing by 99%, erasing a critical source of high-protein seed cake from livestock diets almost overnight. The legal rollback did not just target narcotics, it swept away the entire infrastructure supporting hemp as a wartime feed, despite negligible THC content in strains after 1942. This model of regulatory suppression set a precedent as nylon and soy markets expanded to fill the void. Where Acorn, mast, and other wild feeds required no inputs, hemp's fate was decided in policy files, not on the farm, leaving a gap that commercial feed suppliers were quick to exploit. Number 12. Acorn, mast, and pannage revived a centuries-old woodland tradition that delivered a lifeline during the feed crisis of 1941. As grain vanished from the countryside, British and French extension circulars urged farmers to turn their pigs loose in oak forests, letting them fatten on a natural bounty that required no seed, fertilizer, or labor. The practice known as pannage produced meat with a distinctive richness. Oak-fed pork fetched up to 20% premium at wartime markets, prized for its dense marbling and deep flavor. Acorn supplied a seasonal surge of energy, offering 7 to 9% protein and a high concentration of fats that built sturdy animals through the lean months. Veterinary studies from the period noted that pigs adapted well to the tannins in acorns, while other livestock needed leaching or careful introduction. In a world of plowed fields and rationed grain, the forest floor became a cost-free feedlot, proving that resilience sometimes grows wild beneath your feet. Number 13. The feedlot era rewrote the story of acorn mast with a single word: unsanitary. In the 1950s, meatpacking advertisements and trade magazines hammered home the message that woodland pannage, letting pigs forage for acorns, was dirty, primitive, and unfit for modern consumers. Slogans like "clean pork comes from concrete" and "forest-fed means filth" echoed across magazine spreads and radio spots. By 1965, over 70% of American pork came from confinement systems, with industry leaders touting the hygiene of tiled pens and whitewashed walls. Regulatory language soon followed, labeling outdoor pannage as a disease risk and pushing small producers to abandon centuries-old woodland traditions. They erased a feed source that needed no grain, no synthetic fertilizer, and no expensive infrastructure, clearing the way for industrial feeds and a new definition of cleanliness. Number 14. Sweet potato vines became a quiet lifeline for livestock across the Pacific Islands during the food crises of World War II. As imported grain vanished, 1944 agricultural bulletins from Japan and the Philippines urged farmers to harvest the sprawling vines, not just the tubers, for cattle, pigs, and goats. These lush green stems and leaves delivered a digestible protein content between 14 and 17%, rivaling alfalfa and outperforming most tropical grasses, all without the need for synthetic fertilizer or irrigation. Extension reports highlighted that boiling the vines before feeding could cut oxalate levels by up to 70%, making them safer for daily use. In resource-poor zones, a single field could produce several tons of biomass through the rainy season, offering a steady, low-input feed even when commercial pellets were out of reach. The resilience and adaptability of sweet potato vines made them indispensable. They were proof that survival sometimes grows in the margins, not in monocrops. Number 15. The quiet disappearance of sweet potato vines from Pacific Island farms marks a turning point in post-war agriculture. After serving as a vital, zero-input feed during the war, producing tons of digestible green protein with no need for fertilizer, these vines were systematically cleared in the decades that followed. By the mid-1960s, international development loans prioritized export crops like pineapple and sugarcane, tying local economies to monoculture. Policy papers from the era urged the use of chemical desiccants and herbicides to prepare fields, with glyphosate field preparation documented as early as 1974. On some islands, herbicide use jumped six-fold between 1965 and 1985, driven by promises of efficiency and higher export yields. The shift erased a resilient, homegrown feed source, locking farmers into cycles of imported grain and chemical dependency. The loss of sweet potato vines reveals how economic incentives and chemical inputs reshaped what could grow and what was allowed to feed livestock. Number 16. Amaranth was the Victory Garden's quiet powerhouse, offering a dual harvest of protein-rich leaves and grain when every calorie counted. Wartime circulars from 1943 urged home gardeners to sow amaranth alongside beans and squash, not just for family use, but as a lifeline for backyard poultry and pigs. The plant thrived with little water, producing broad green leaves that reached up to 18% protein by dry matter, enough to rival many commercial feeds. As the season turned, its tiny seeds matured into a high-protein grain, extending its value far beyond the salad bowl. Farmers noted that both chickens and hogs gained weight steadily on chopped amaranth, while the annual's deep roots shrugged off droughts that withered other crops. In a world where synthetic fertilizers were scarce and grain was rationed for humans, amaranth's versatility, leaf and seed, food and feed, became a model of resilience. Number 17. Amaranth's wartime legacy as a resilient feed plant collided head-on with the rise of chemical herbicides. By the late 1990s, weed science journals sounded the alarm. Palmer amaranth, once a staple in Victory Gardens, was now breaking through glyphosate defenses across the American South. Field surveys confirmed resistance in 23 states by 2010, with infestations spreading at rates that outpaced any previous weed threat. The response was swift and regulatory. State after state added amaranth to noxious weed lists, restricting its cultivation and movement. In the eyes of agribusiness, amaranth had become the poster child for herbicide resistance, fueling a narrative of chemical warfare between crops and weeds. This shift reframed a former superfeed as an agricultural enemy, driving ongoing battles in courtrooms and farm fields alike, and setting the stage for a broader reckoning with the limits of chemical control. And finally, in first place, pollarded tree hay stands as the perennial backbone of wartime resilience. During the blockades from 1942 to 1944, villages across Nazi-occupied Europe turned to willow and elm, cutting leafy branches high above livestock reach and drying them on open-air racks. These leaves averaged 17% protein, matching many commercial feeds of the era, and carried natural salicylates, offering livestock a mild anti-inflammatory effect long before veterinary pharmaceuticals became widespread. Agroforestry journals from the period highlight how these tree crops delivered steady fodder through drought, flood, or war, with no need for synthetic fertilizer or imported grain. Yet as hay balers and pellet mills took over after the war, the practice faded. Between 1950 and 1960, veterinary analgesic sales soared by more than 300%, reflecting a shift from natural remedies to purchased medicines. Pollarded tree hay closes the loop on wartime feed ingenuity, proof that perennial systems once buffered farms against crisis, and a reminder that resilience often grows where the plow cannot reach. Across all 9 forgotten feeds, one pattern stands out. The most resilient self-sustaining options vanished as industrial inputs rose. When profit depends on dependency, even abundance becomes a liability. These banned crops prove that food security isn't just about resources, it's about who controls the narrative. In a world of fragile supply chains, remembering lost solutions could matter more than ever. Which of these feeds would you bring back? Let us know below.